Hi, this is Talie Warulkar, the anxiety coach. I am joined here today with Yael Maoz to talk about her anxiety journey as part of a series of interviews that I am doing in order to take that shame lid off of anxiety. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Yael about her anxiety surrounding any transitions within her life. Hi, Yael. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Tiffanie Yael Maoz. I live in Israel, but I'm originally from the US. And I am a publisher and business coach. And I transitioned from being a scientist to that new career. So have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas.
Where are you located in Israel?
I'm located in Rehovot.
Very nice. And she, by the way, I just want to add that Yael has the most gorgeous, fluffy, yummy dog.
Might pop in, we'll see.
Okay, what is your earliest memory of having this anxiety that's surrounding transitions in your life?
So I would say that probably it would have been around between second and third grade. My parents were getting divorced, and as a result of that, we were going to be changing schools, or at least I was.
So, what you
And
were like 7, 8 years old, 9? What was it?
yeah, I was around 8 years old,
Okay.
and I had a lot. So there was a lot of change going on. Obviously, the parents divorcing, changing schools, and it seemed to manifest around times tables, right? We can all appreciate that, multiplication tables. And my mom told me I was so tense about it that she caught me saying them in my sleep. I had so much
Wow.
like pent up about it in the midst of everything else. So it's very yeah, so from very early on it was definitely I was a more intense kind of kid.
Were you learning the times table around the same time as when your parents were divorcing and you were changing schools?
Yes.
So it sounds
Yeah,
like it's like the association.
like everything all together. Yeah.
So interesting. But if I say to you now, times table, does that trigger anything inside of you?
No, I think that the schools that I went to did a really good job of addressing it, whether it was acknowledged directly or not. What they did was like, it was a hard third grade year, very, very hard. Just a lot going on. But by fourth grade, I had a really amazing teacher, and I think she really tapped in to what it means to help a child to become more confident. And she volunteered me to work with other kids that had learning problems
Mm.
and to help them practice their times tables. And so I think once a week or twice a week, something like that, I would go to this other classroom and help other students um, to practice their times tables. And it made me
Wow.
confident and made me see myself as a teacher,
Sure.
a helper, and to kind of take what I had overcome and help somebody else. And I think that was really,
That's
really,
a really smart move on her
yeah,
half. Really
Mrs.
smart.
Roth, if you're out there, I still remember you.
It's amazing how like that one person, that one teacher can like make such a difference and you still remember them. What is it, like 30 years, 35 years later? It's incredible.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Amazing.
okay, can you share with us a story somewhere throughout your life, maybe in your adulthood, of where this has really affected you?
So definitely I would say it made I obviously we all go through periods of intense stress that can kind of trigger us. But for me, the really big one was during my PhD. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize like the percentage of PhD students that are on anxiety or depression medication is astronomical. There's such a high rate that it's usually included in student medical plans, counseling, and psychiatric consultations. Like it's included because it's such a common thing.
Sure,
And
the pressure. How old were
yeah,
you at this stage, approximately?
I would say around 26.
Okay.
So by that point, I had had my first child, my daughter, and
You're
I was,
married as well. Okay, with a
yes, so
child.
married
Yeah.
with my daughter, and we I was about halfway through my PhD. And at that point, what happens is that you have to deliver, you have a major, major exam, and you have also to present some research and to get it cleared. And it's sort of, I mean, people think that the PhD is really um, the conferring of the PhD at the end of the process when they say you've passed or you haven't passed is the real like deciding moment, but it's usually not. Like they're not going to let you get to that point if they don't think that you're ready, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Everybody who gets to that point generally goes through or goes through with, okay, maybe you need to make a few edits, but they're not going to let you spend 4, 5, 6, 7 years of your life on something and then say, no, we're not going to give it
Right.
to you. Go do something else. But that midpoint is the deciding factor, because by then they expect that all the coursework that you've taken and your understanding of research processes and things should be at a point that you've demonstrated that you have the skill set necessary to do that research and to finish your PhD. And so that is the really stressful moment. And for me, it was really tough because even though in my family there had been open conversations about depression and anxiety in the family, there wasn't, I was on my own, and I hadn't really had to get to a point where I needed to say enough is enough. And there came a point when I had to go, and I went to the psychiatrist at the university, and I'm like, this is what's happening. I have too many thoughts. My heart is racing. I am having heartburn
Can
constantly
I just
where
take you back? Yeah, Yael? You said that although you had a lot of open conversations, um, do you think you didn't recognize it yet? Do you think maybe your brain wasn't mature enough, you weren't wise enough, you hadn't experienced enough in order to recognize your threshold and you
so I
surpassed that
don't
threshold?
I definitely don't think it was that. I definitely knew I
Okay.
had passed the threshold. Um, because for me, that part of those open conversations were having conversations with my dad, who has struggled with depression and
Mhm.
anxiety. He and I have had a lot of conversations over the years, and he was very open to me about his experiences. And he shared with me at some point that, he gave himself 2 weeks, and like, you can feel down. It's natural to feel down. We don't have to be happy all the time, and things are not always going super easy in our life. Like,
Emotions are there to be felt. That's what you said.
yeah,
They're there to tell you something.
and they're meant to be felt, but it's when it's going on for too long and you can't get yourself out of that or that cycle that you need to do something and you need to get help. Um, so that was something that I kind of held to. And my husband, I've been very honest with him about that. And we decided together, like I said, like he knew what I was going through. He knew I was already trying um the heartburn medication, and I was doing all these things and trying to get in more exercise and all the healthy ways that would usually work for me: reading books, spending time alone, getting exercise, eating healthy, getting enough sleep. I was
Mhm.
doing all those things, but it wasn't getting me out. And at that point, I'm like, okay, we've passed the 2 week margin. I've done everything that I can do. Now it's time to get some help. And I did. And it was a very healthy thing for me. And I stayed on the meds for a year.
I want
Did
to say
that
at
help?
this point, I want to say at this point that one of the hardest things about having any kind of mental illness is the ability to go out there and get yourself help. Firstly, to recognize that we need help, but secondly, what's even harder is actually saying, "Yeah, I need help. I need that." Um,
And
and it
knowing where to
sounds
go.
to me,
I
and
think
knowing
that
where to go, and it sounds to me like your dad was a very had instilled something in you to be able to get up after 2 weeks and go see a doctor and do something about it.
Yeah. Because it had gotten to the point, like I had had those emotional ebbs and flows. It's not like
Right.
it was the first 2 weeks of my life that I had ever
Yeah.
had anxiety or really low. Um, it wasn't the first time. It was the first time that I wasn't able to get myself out of it.
Out of it.
Um, and so that as an adult, that was the real moment that I was like, okay, I have a child, I have, a husband, I have a job, this PhD I was working on, and I really wanted to see it succeed. I didn't want to walk away, but I needed to be me at my best. And I needed the help. So I was talking to a therapist through the university and got an appointment with the psychiatrist to talk about medication.
Yeah.
It was very straightforward, but I think I was very lucky that it was very clear who I needed to talk to and where I needed to go. And I don't think everybody always knows.
How to get the help.
Like even once you acknowledge that, okay, I'm in over my head. I like there's where I'm at now, like I've tried all I can try and it's not working. Now what? Thank God I knew what I needed to do and I had access. I was able to
Where
get
did you
appointments
learn? Where did you know? How did you know what to do?
because I was already aware of the university's healthcare system
Right.
and the what they made available to all students and graduate students was um, accessibility
Information.
of therapists. And
Information.
through the therapist, I knew that the psychiatrist was available. Um, it was just, I feel really, really lucky that at that point in my life, when I needed the help, I didn't have to go looking through the news, through the yellow pages or whatever it was at that time, or go asking friends, who do
Yellow
you go to?
pages.
Who do
Yeah.
you know? Like I didn't have to expose myself in any way. It just like I had that connection. And I think even that, like having people a
I think
database.
having the information, because sometimes just reaching out for help with
Yeah.
anxiety can trigger anxiety. And if you also
And
you don't even know what to do, that could also trigger anxiety. Then you end up in a cycle.
right. What to say and how much is it going to cost? And there's all these other things that go
Yeah,
into it.
for
You're
sure.
like, okay, it's just making my anxiety worse to think about getting help for my
And then you
anxieties.
end up in a cycle. You end up in the catch 22. It's like round and round, for sure. Definitely. So after you went on medication, was there anything else that you did that helped yourself to help yourself?
So yeah, self-care gets tossed around a lot. It wasn't really a term that was tossed around so much back then, but Um, I'm an avid reader. I love reading and I read a ton of business books. And at that time, I was also reading a ton of scientific articles, but that is not self-care, right? For me, self-care is diving into a novel for several hours on a Saturday afternoon and being okay with that and letting that be okay and knowing that, okay, some of my time, I'm blocking my time for work. And then I'm making myself available to be with my kids and, my husband and have an evening
Is
to
this
relax.
something you still do now, or was it something you did back then only?
I don't, back then, I think I used to watch shows. There was like Hulu and stuff in the States. There's not that now. So my husband and I used to watch a show or something in the evening when we sit down together. I don't do that anymore because I'm not really into TV. I would much rather sit down with a book. So today I read. My husband knows if I can't shut my brain off to go to sleep, I have to
Mm,
read usually for at least an hour before bed just to like
mhm.
get myself.
Wind down.
I just have to close that door. Like we can go back to that tomorrow. We can go back to sorting out the world's problems and what happens next, because that's the whole thing with transitions. What happens next? How can I be prepared? How can I anticipate um
So you're
what
saying
happens?
before you go to sleep, to help yourself calm your brain down, what you do is you read to
I read,
unwind.
and I
I
also
wanna
have
I wanna just say at this point for anybody that's listening that a lot of the time anxiety can really hit when you're tossing and you're turning in bed and you can't focus and you can't like go to sleep, and you're trying so hard to go to sleep, but your brain is like on.
Yeah.
Um, just putting it out there for anyone that's listening, maybe you can do something just before you go to bed to calm your brain down, to calm your mind down, to calm your body down and unwind, which is a very super healthy habit. Not going on your phone, not
Not
that,
putting on
not
your phone.
scrolling.
The
I'm talking
other
about
thing
to
I do is
unwind,
I keep
unwind.
a piece
Yeah.
of paper, a piece of paper and a pencil in my drawer
Yes.
next to my bed so that if something is nagging at me, I just one, two words, I write
Yes.
it down. And that way
Yes. Get it
there
out your brain. Put it on paper. Yes.
and leave it to the side. And then I read because, and for me, I have to read things that are not too much like my normal life. If it's too much like my normal life, like I'm talking about a novel, it,
Yes.
it doesn't let me escape. I'm like trying
Yeah.
to correlate events or people to what's going on. It needs to be very, very different, a different country, a different place, a different world, if you like sci-fi, whatever, but like
Yes.
it has to be, I
To
have to
get
get
yourself
out.
out of your situation and somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Um, okay. How does the anxiety surrounding transition affect your everyday life now?
Um, definitely over prepare a lot. I get a lot more rigid about transitions, about the way I want things to go. My family knows I'm a bit more uptight than Abba, than their father about, doing things and getting ready for things. And I tend to be just over plan. I plan a lot. Even when I go on a trip, like hotels and restaurants have to be figured out in advance. I need to know where I'm sleeping and what I'm eating at all times. And then I can be flexible. So don't be surprised if we're having breakfast and I'm asking what's for lunch and where is it going to be. Like that's just I need grounding. Like I need
Right.
points to expect, like to know what to
What's going
expect
to
at different
happen?
points. There can be variability in between, but it's sort of like these was like milestones or something, like touch points that I can say, okay, things are going according to plan, more or less, like we're moving out of this space and into this
Into the
space.
next space. So let's say you're away, okay, and you haven't got lunch planned or you haven't got dinner planned. What goes on then?
Oh, I
Can you
get
explain? Can you explain how does the anxiety get triggered?
okay. If it's just me, it's not,
Yes.
I can kind of roll with
You're
it.
with a family. You're with a family. You're on a
Again,
trip.
not too bad, but yeah, it's the family. It's when I feel like I'm responsible for others
Mm,
and the plan is not coming together, and like we need to figure out the food thing. Like I get a lot more snippy with my husband, which is not nice, but I do. Um, because to me it's an urgent thing that should be resolved. Like it needs to be resolved.
is
Um,
this just surrounding your kids as a family, or let's say you're with your husband away, or you're with another a friend away?
um, that's a good question. So with my husband, I don't think it bothers me because I know it doesn't bother him. He's super relaxed. He's super go with the flow. For me and him, it's mostly about just being to places on time. I
Right.
like to know that like the Seder is being followed. And so I kind of push him a little bit, but it's not regarding food or activities as much, so much as being on time. With a friend, though, is a good question because the relationship is different. And I did do this for my 40th birthday. I went on a vacation with one of my closest friends, and we were both turning 40 around the same time. And so we decided we're going to do a girls' trip. But she left all the planning to me.
Cool.
And that was actually great because she tends to be a person that would go on a cruise or something like that where things are more or less organized and her husband is the planner. So
Right.
it gives her anxiety to have to plan, whereas for me it gives me anxiety to
I
give
see.
somebody
So it's
else
to know your triggers. This is a great thing to know what are your triggers, because everybody's triggers are very, very different.
yeah. So
First step in helping yourself is to know your triggers. Yes.
I am the planner in my friend group. They all know it. Like
Yeah.
they sometimes I don't want to do it, but the consequence of me not doing it is that I don't enjoy it as much. Like I'm much more stressed.
Yeah.
Um, I like to know. I just like to know. And not everybody needs to know, but I like to know
But you know
what's the
your trigger. You know your triggers. Yeah.
so so yes, I am the planner in the group. I am the planner in my family. I make all travel arrangements and
So in terms
event.
of going back to food, you said that it's not something that gets triggered surrounding your husband or you, but what about your kids? Let's say you're going away with your kids.
Yes, so definitely. So luckily, I guess, my
Otherwise, you're
daughter
going to get
is very
Ema,
similar.
Ema.
She
Yes.
also likes to know what's happening. So it's kind of good because she backs me up. It's not like everybody in the family is saying, Ema, relax, mommy, it's okay. No, like they're also like, yeah, what are we doing?
What's for dinner? Yeah. What's for lunch? I'm hungry. Yeah.
Right. So definitely my daughter and I see eye to eye. And so it's kind of great, at least that I have a
How
little
old's
bit of,
your daughter?
she's 16, almost
Okay.
17. So yeah. Yeah. So it's been interesting to have conversations with her when she sees herself having these same feelings in her friend group, because it's a younger group,
That's so
right?
interesting.
And
Yeah.
she's like, they're not getting the food figured out. They don't know where they're going. Like, and it's like driving her crazy. And she's
Crazy.
like, but I don't want to be the one that plans it all the time. If I don't plan it, then it's not going to happen. And I'm like, welcome to my life. So she's learning, but it's
Yeah.
definitely something you, like you said, you got to know your triggers, and we have to be sensitive to our teenagers that they're learning them as they go too. You know, they can't always
Yes.
name it.
Even kids younger, my kids as well, definitely, for sure. Things that trigger them. Um, how do you help yourself in your everyday life now? In any kind of transition that you have? Let's say you've been triggered, something's happened and you've been triggered. How do you help yourself?
So usually I try to take like some sort of um break, detour, like, okay, like I'm getting overwhelmed. It's time for a coffee. It's time for a drink. Like, let's find any
Yes.
place that we can get to where we can just sit for a moment, regroup, have a drink of some sort, hot, cold, whatever, and decide what we're going to do next and how we're going to handle this situation. Are we going to split up and do different things? Are we going to make a decision together and we're going to look up on our phone where we're going to go, what we're going to do, what needs to happen?
Yeah.
Usually I can't just keep walking in this indecisive, up in the air space. I need a decision to be made. And for some people, they don't need that. And the only way you're going to get them to come in and be part of the conversation is if you actually make them have a physical stop. So a good way to do that I found is just, okay, we're going to stop and get a drink or an ice cream, something like that, something small, but that gets
Yes.
kind of like regroup, works with adults too. And then to decide, okay, what happens next? And then I can kind of get everybody back on board because I need it.
You're saying
Um,
this is when you guys are away?
yeah. Even if we're traveling in Israel,
Yeah.
like if something has gone awry, usually the best thing to do is to get a drink. But I think
Coffee. Always time for coffee.
coffee or an ice cream. Like
Yeah.
nobody's
Yeah.
gonna say no. Right?
My
Like
kids know. Emma's drinking coffee now. Don't talk to her. This is her break. This is when I unwind. This is when I relax my brain completely. They know it. Even with my son now, he's 5. When he was 18 months, Emma drink coffee. That's what he used to call it, coffee, and he knew. Don't talk to me. He knew that. I trained them very young.
good, good. They
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
They
They
have
know.
the boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What about like in your everyday life now, as in like when you're working, picking up the kids, like everyday life, you're not away, you know,
Right. So okay, so I'll tell you one example is that I have a bunch of clients and
right.
God, and sometimes, they get to a point where it just happens that they're messaging you all the time, around the clock. I got a message at 11 o'clock at night from one
Yeah.
client and 10:30 last night from a different client, right?
Yeah.
Being able to set those boundaries and to just not answer, or to say, so one, I didn't even click on it. I could see enough that she was just telling me she had done her homework and here's the spreadsheet. And I did not go into it because I didn't want her to see that I had seen it or that
Of
I was
setting
still,
healthy boundaries, setting a
yeah.
healthy boundary.
And then the other client is another client that I have, and I know that that is her schedule. She tends to message me later in the day and in the night and not in the morning. That's
Her
time
schedule.
zones and everything else. Like that's just the way it works. So she had sent me something that was an audio message, and I felt like it was important that I listen to it, but it was a 4-minute audio message. I listened for the first minute and then I responded and said, I have not listened to all of this. I understand this is a very big issue. I will address it first thing in the morning, my time, and then you could see it. And I'm happy to meet with you later in the day to, work out whatever needs to be worked out to troubleshoot this issue.
So you're saying
Um,
you're saying that the solution that you use, the thing that you use to help yourself, is to basically set those healthy boundaries.
yes, setting healthy
Yes.
boundaries for clients, but also for myself. Like I need to remember that I don't have to be available all the time. Just because I am available doesn't need to mean that I have to be available to everybody. Like just
Yes.
because my schedule is free, right, does not mean I'm available. I guess that's the way I should say it. Um,
You might not have a client, that doesn't mean you're necessarily free. You could have other priorities, other things that are important,
if
still
it's just
working.
me, even if it's
Yes.
I'm in the middle of reading my book now, this is my hour.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
You've got a date with your book, as we call it. Yeah, completely. It's called setting healthy boundaries.
right. So I
Very
have to,
much true.
that's
Yeah.
a lot. And I try to really use scheduling software as much as possible,
Yeah.
which if anybody has like this kind of anxiety, I highly recommend it because one of the things that I've done is I've made it so that people can't set a meeting with me the same day because I
Mm,
don't like being surprised by that. I want to have 24 hours notice or
right.
18 hours. I forget exactly what I set it to,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to know in
In
advance that I'm
advance.
with
Yes.
someone and not have it sprung on me 3 hours later that all of a sudden something's showing up in my schedule, in my calendar. Um, like maybe I hadn't blocked off the time, but maybe I was planning to have lunch with my daughter or, you
Yeah.
know, just little things like that. Like I don't like being taken by
Setting
surprise.
healthy boundaries. Yeah.
And I don't like surprise parties at all.
That's always good to know.
Yeah.
I think it's like when you're in a restaurant and suddenly like all these balloons and the candle comes and you have to stand on your chair and it was like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for the
Yeah.
kids, not for us. Yeah. Okay. Yael, is there anything you want to add? Any other way that you helped yourself today? Do you do any like certain techniques, tools that you use that you can share with us?
I would really encourage, okay, two things is that number one is I think that you need an accountability partner of some sort, whether that's a coach, a spouse, a sibling. I do
Definitely.
not think it should be your
Yeah.
parents. I'm just going to put that out there because, as I said, we in my family, like we talk about it a lot. And I just think that at some point we need to give our parents a break because they're going to feel tremendous responsibility for you. And once you're an adult, they shouldn't have to feel as much of that.
Yeah.
So I think it should be a sibling, a spouse, a best friend, a counselor, a coach, whoever that is for you, figure out what works. But you need to have someone that you can say, I'm going through whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And
Basically, someone to have
my
your
daughter and
back.
I, for a while, we called it Skittles. Like, I'm in the Skittles right now, like, or whatever.
You
Like,
know what Skittles are in the UK? They're
it's
the
a
most
candy.
amazing, delicious candy.
Yeah. So it was like, I
Yeah.
don't think she would have a problem with me sharing that, but just like we needed to come up with a way to talk about it without it being intense,
Yes.
or labeling it something super strong when it's just I'm working through it, right? We're not at the point yet where it is something that has to be addressed, but I need to let you know, like
Like
something's
there's
going on.
Skittles on the ground. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I think. You need to have
To have
that person.
someone that has your back.
Yes, and you need to have a way to talk about it so that when it's time to take action, further action, that you have somebody there that can can kind of support you in doing that, because
Yeah.
at that point it's still going to be hard to
Yes.
find it, whatever. So you need that ally um, in that process.
Support for any to get better, to get healthy, support is needed. We're social beings. Humans are social beings. We need the connection for sure. Is there anything else, any message that for anyone who's watching, is there a message you want to give over?
Share your journey. You don't have to share your pain or the depth of what you go through with your kids, but they'll be a lot more open to talking to you when they go through things, if they know that you can understand and that it's normal. It's part of life. A lot of us go through things, and there are ways to handle it in a healthy way. They don't need to go looking on YouTube, for instance, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't realize just how big of a deal that was. And I think that is definitely something I would encourage all parents to do, is find ways to just, you know, even at the dinner table, how was your day today? And wow, I felt like I had a lot of meetings and I just felt a lot of pressure, and I know I'll get through it, but I felt it right here. And
Yeah.
then like, because then the kids, they might not experience it then, but then all of a sudden they're like, why I'm having a heart attack or something, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
My
it's
stomach
okay.
hurts. My stomach hurts me. Yeah.
Things like that. Like they need to start being able to understand our
What's
emotions
going on in your
have
body, emotion,
physical effects on our body too.
for sure. Definitely. I just want to ask you quickly before we finish off, okay? Do you remember the first time your father ever spoke to you about this, or because you said you had very open conversations?
We did, because my father went through depression during the divorce between my father and my mother, and it was quite severe. And
Yes.
so you can imagine, if I was 8, 9, around
So it
8 years
was
old, that
young.
was
It was
happening.
young.
By the time I was 14, we could talk about it, right?
Yes.
Like I was in high school. Again, a lot of transitions. I was talking about my feelings, with transitioning to high school and the stress of school and how to deal with stress and things like that. And my dad, I have to say, riding in the car is like the best thing ever. I loved all those car rides.
Yeah.
It's a pity that, my parents did get divorced, but one of the upshots of that was that all that time going from one house to another twice a week meant time in the car with my parents to talk. And my dad and I had a lot of hard, I don't want to say hard conversations, but conversations that might be hard to have face to face. But when you're sitting next to each other and you're both looking at the road, you can talk about things. And
It's less
so,
intense. The
yeah,
intensity
so
out of
I
it.
feel like it was a way for us to talk about just life, and some of that comes back to anxiety and depression and how those things come into play and how they'd shown up in other people in our family, and how they dealt with it. And different people deal with it in different ways. Some
Yeah.
people stay on medication for decades, and that's what works for them, and that's okay. And some people don't find that they need it constantly, but there are
Well,
times
it's
when,
all about self-awareness. Yeah.
yeah. But to be open to having those conversations is so important, and finding a way to have them in a way that works for you and your family. I think it's important.
Totally. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story with us. If you have been affected by anxiety in any way at some point in your life and you are willing to be interviewed to share with us your journey, please be in touch with me. Details will be at the end of this video. Thank you so much, Yael.
My pleasure.